Juliana, and I recreated parts of the hidden world with only $20 US. This video will be broken up into several parts, including how I made this, the inspiration behind it, and a lot of the problems I encountered while making this animation. I recommend you watch the full video first because this will probably spoil your experience of that video. And anyways, let's go ahead to part 1. What am I doing? It's early April, schoolwork is piling up, and I'm reminded of Disney's Flight of Passage ride, where you're allowed to fly your Ikran over the beautiful forests of Pandora. I wanted to create a similar experience with a different franchisable character, and so I start brainstorming ideas. I knew the main thing I wanted to do was capture the magic of flying with Toothless. I was originally going to have him fly through the woods, as you can see in the remnants of the layout phase. And why did I do this? Because I did not want to make the hidden world. However, early in the layout phase, I figured out this would not work because I would have to render thousands of trees in order to make it look even remotely okay. So the hidden world it was. Part 2. How on earth do I do this? For the animation itself, I was originally going to have the camera follow a similar path to Toothless through the set. However, as early as the layout phase, this started to create problems, mainly that the two motion paths had to work together in order to make it look cohesive. And it was really hard when the two motion paths didn't line up because any little change would screw up the whole thing. So why didn't I just make the environment and then animate as if the camera and dragon were reacting to it? That just seems logical, right? And the simple answer to that is lag. The math required to calculate the preview in Blender runs really slowly when there's tons of stuff happening in your scene, such as, I don't know, an entire hidden world. And I would have ended up with something that looks really rough and really kind of not good. So in order to make the animations and camera movement the way I wanted, I decided to opt for a video game strategy, where the camera and the essentials in your scene don't move, but instead your set moves around you. This caused problems I'll get to later, but basically for the animation stages, it made it so much easier to actually animate Toothless, and the lag was not nearly as bad. I'll put the animation stages at the end of this video if you're interested. Now, part 3. The file size is large. I started making the hidden world by creating the assets I'd use in the cave. These assets included the glowy rocks, crystals, whatever these are, glowworms I'd simulate, rocks, and much more. A lot of these assets, like the crystals and rock formations, were procedural and had procedural textures that I can use to shape them however I wanted, without jeopardizing the resolution of the asset or stuff like that. For the crystals on the rocks in this scene and the mushroom thingy whatever they are here, I decided to use particle systems to attach the mushroom-like things to whatever these are, and the crystals to the rocks. I made the crystals and fireworms glow with emissive textures, and it created the beautiful lighting you see in these scenes. I also made tiny versions of the different sections of the cave, so I could plan how all I wanted it to be put together. I ended up with something like this. For scale, that little orange thing right there? Yeah, that's Toothless. I then appended the library with the hidden world assets to a file with the Toothless animation, and it was finally time to put the two together. Part 4. Why is this so complicated? After the two pieces were in the file, I began assembling the set and the timings for how I wanted everything to move. Everything you see in the scene is connected to the almighty cube, which I would use to move the entire hidden world. Once most of the set pieces were in place, I did lighting, effects, and other things that I'll list here. I'd like to take a moment though and talk about the fireworms because they were by far the most interesting part. I used what's called a Boyd brain, and I recommend you look it up because it's really interesting and it's honestly not something I should cover in this video. But in short, basically, it's a system with particles that has rules that govern its behavior. I can use this to have a source for the particles and a goal for them to go to. However, Blender didn't like it when I tried to attach the source to the almighty cube. The particles didn't behave normally and it was a mess. They would basically stay in their emitted location, which obviously doesn't work all that well when you're trying to make something that looks like it's alive. So how to get around it? By timing the Boyd brain system and keeping it in place next to the camera, as part of the essential assets that wouldn't move. So that was one section of the cave, however there were other parts as well. So I used variations of this particle system and attached them to whatever these are in this part and the cave walls in this section. Once I was happy with the test renders, it was finally time to render the final animation. Part 5! Almost done, but not really. I began rendering all 2,000 frames in sections. Once I was about halfway through the render, I looked back at the sections of footage and I found this. So I found out that this flickering was likely caused by the denoiser I was using, and if you don't know what a denoiser is, it basically tries to do fast math to produce an image more quickly. However, this can lead to issues like this. So why didn't I just not use the denoiser? Because there's a big difference between a render time of about 2 minutes per frame and 2 hours per frame. Here's a quick comparison. With the denoiser, it only took me about 20 hours to render this entire thing. However, without the denoiser, it would have taken, let's see, we do that. Oh yeah, just a minimum of 167 days. So I did not re-render it, and instead I decided to try to find a solution in post-production that could make it a little less noticeable. I consulted the mighty well of knowledge that is the internet, and found a trick that involved putting the video on top of itself, reducing the top one's opacity to 50%, and moving it over one frame. This helped make the flickers less distracting, however, it doesn't work very well with fast-moving objects. For example, as you see here, it looks like Toothless has 4 wings. So why didn't I use an AI software to fix the problem? Answer, it was expensive. And speaking of expense, as I mentioned in the video's title, I spent about $20 on this video. And that goes to, drumroll please, the student edition of the Adobe Creative Suite for less than 1 month. Part 6, the problems. I'm gonna list the rendering problems that I found while rewatching this video that I haven't talked about yet, including the evil line caused by the volumetric clouds, the sudden light change as I switched from one render to another, the weirdly lit portion of the cave, these static looking clouds that I'm guessing probably was caused by the denoiser, fireworms clip through whatever these are. Fireworms go through large crystals and die because they have lifespans. Fireworms appear late. And last but not least, fireworms die right in front of you. So now that you know what all went into making this animation, I'm going to show you the animation process, which includes the layout, the rough animation, the final animation, and then the entire render with the lighting and such. Hope you enjoy!